And if we can, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to call Dr. Smonker to do a welcome. So if you'd like to grab a seat, please feel free to do so. And we're going to continue to have people coming in now. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. All right. Well, first of all, Eric, thank you. So it's good to see you. Eric is mean green by relationship. His wife is the vice president for student affairs here. It's always great to see him. And I just want to say hi to all of you. We're here today. It's great to welcome you to our lovely campus here, Discovery Park. You should know we also have another campus up in Bristol now called Inspired Park. So discovery and inspiration and what we're all about. This is a 300-acre campus, and we have been growing and moving and increasing our research productivity thanks to our dean, Hashem back there waving with his proud green tie. Welcome. And he has been doing some really good things out here. We've seen some huge growth, some big additions built, and there's more planned. So we're going well. So first of all, welcome to Congressman Burgess's Energy Efficiency Summit and Fair. This is always a summer event. It's always an informative event. I heard there's a lime green Tesla out there somewhere, and I want to find out if it's available for being lent to for me business purposes. And I hope you enjoy the conference. You'll learn a lot. You know, the University of North Texas, one of our mottos is "We need green," and by that, it's not just the green color that we represent in the mean green. It is the fact that we're a very sustainable campus. In fact, we're considered the most sustainable and energy efficient campus in the state of Texas. That we're our Apogee Stadium is the first new platinum football stadium in the country. I can go on here, but we have done a lot. We have great programs for the environment and conservation. We have top ranked. This is a rigorous environmental philosophy program in the world. You go, what's that? Well, actually, it's a blend of biology, engineering, and philosophy that is trying to create. Okay, I'll work it up here now. That is attempting to preserve fragile ecosystems around the country and around the world. And we have the southernmost research lab in the world in the Cape Horn area, Punta Arenas and Puerto Williams in Chile. So it's a jumping off point for Antarctica. It is a beautiful ecosystem. We just worked with the Chilean government for the $20 million research facility down there to make sure that we're understanding the habitat and marine protection zones around it. We're a tree campus, and this is big, you ready? We've also been awarded by the Princeton Review and elsewhere and been announced as a bee campus. Now, if you don't know, bees are important to pollinators, so we need to make sure we keep our bees going. I've talked to you a little about our energy efficiency and conservation programs. They've helped us a lot. They saved us a lot of money. We do quite a few things here on the campus to try to make sure that we're sustainable and we are continuously upgrading our facilities to reflect that. But I digress. The reason we're here today is to listen to some folks who are going to present around our energy remarks. Our federal keynote remarks by North Menendez. Sorry, my pronunciation isn't so good right here. We're going to hear about auto efficiency from Drew Campbell and some of our own people here. Dr. Wong Choi, who will talk to us about rechargeable batteries and advances there. So there's some really cool things happening. But now I'd like to introduce Congressman Burgess, who's a friend of our campus and friend of this district. He's been here with us for a long, long time, helping us in critical areas, helping students where they need it. But it's always good to have a friend, good to have a friend who's so senior in our Congress. Dr. Burgess, after practicing medicine for nearly 3 decades, was the first elected to Congress in 2002. So if you want to add that up, he's been running for quite a while. He says it's just all part of the course now. It's part of his pulse in every other year basis. He was reelected in November of 2020, and he represents the majority of Fayette County and parts of Kent County. He's the most senior medical doctor serving in the U.S. House of Representatives. He serves on the prestigious House Energy and Commerce Committee, where he's a member of the Subcommittee on Health, Subcommittee on Oversight and Investigations, and Subcommittee on Energy. In addition, he's a member of the House Rules Committee and serves as the Republican leader's designee to the House Budget Committee. Boy, that's great. What's better is that we have a friend of motion. We know that somebody who can count on, someone who helps in a pinch, someone who's been instrumental in helping us to acquire instrumentation, certain types of federal support. From time to time, we really appreciate his efforts. And I'd like to ask you all to give a big round of applause as I invite him to the podium to talk a little bit about what he's been working on and introduce our next speaker. So.
I've got to turn it on, but thank you, Dr. Sanchez. It's really good of you to let us be back out here. We've done several of these now at the Discovery Park, but it wasn't always so. The very first one of these, I was thinking when I came through the exhibit hall, the very first one of these that I did was back in 2005. This thing come on, Eric. What do I need to do?
And you'll probably need to turn that one off, not have feedback.
Good plan. So back in 2005, another deputy energy secretary was coming through town and said, I'd like to do an energy event with you. Could you put something together? And it was on relatively short notice. So we did a very quick and hurried event in the parking lot of the Home Depot in Flower Mound, Texas. And what amazed me then, because it was very short notice, and I don't know if I went on the radio and talked about it, but nevertheless, there were a lot of people there in July in the parking lot in Flower Mound to hear about new products in energy efficiency. You know, it just so happened at the time my wife and I were building a house, and I got these grandiose ideas. We put big solar panels up and put big windmills up. My wife is an architect, and she said, you know, we could use off-the-shelf technology that's there right now and simply make the home energy efficient and achieve some of the same goals that you're trying to do. And she did that with an efficient heating system, of course, the high SEER energy, ultra energy efficient air conditioners were just kind of coming into their own. Low E glass, triple pane windows, all of the things that we now, it's just part of the normal complement of energy efficient products she incorporated into the house. And what I saw was an electric bill that fell about 60% from what I was paying in Flower Mound to what I was paying in Louisville, and the cost per kilowatt was about the same. In fact, the energy provider was the same one. So it really brought home for me, it really demonstrated to me just how important energy efficiency was. And the reason I felt it was important was because here's something that I can control. Sure, we're going to hear from the agency. We're going to hear from some of the top people in research. But here's something I can control as a consumer. So just like I plan purchases for anything else in my life, if I plan purchases for energy, maybe I can make smarter purchases and smarter decisions. And logically, if you follow from that, is it going to be helpful on an economic basis to the country? Is it going to be helpful on an environmental basis to the country? All of these things are then necessary developments. Now, we unfortunately don't live in that house in Louisville anymore. City started getting a little bit too congested, so we moved up to just north of Aubrey. The city is rapidly catching up with us, I might add. So those 5 years have gone by very quickly. But when we built again, I'm like all in on energy efficiency. What else could we do? And she said, well, you know, we could use this home insulation in the attic. Never occurred to me that by keeping the attic temperature at a very manageable level, your air conditioner doesn't have to work so hard. one of the things I think I learned at one of these events. And so those electricity bills came down even further by just using state-of-the-art energy efficiency materials. And it's not, so, well, I'm not going to be building a house for some time. Yes, retrofitting windows, it's not as expensive as it seems now. In previous events that we've done, we've had to focus on building materials and renovations. This one tends to be more on the transportation side. And that's the other thing I've learned in doing this now over 15 years time, is that there is almost so much to be covered. You need to concentrate on one place. So a little bit later, we're going to hear from Drew Campbell, and he's going to talk about some of the things he sees just over the horizon in the transportation sector. And then we're going to hear from Dr. Choi on what's going to be available as far as energy storage for your automobile and your home as well, I imagine. It's interesting, in probably 2006 or 2007, I had a automobile dealer contact me and say, I'd like to bring a Nissan Leaf to for your display outside the summit. Yeah, sure, knock yourself out. Nissan Leaf, this is Texas. You can't go anywhere in a Nissan Leaf and get back. But he did. He brought the Nissan Leaf. There was a lot of interest in it. I was surprised by the amount of interest there was in an electric car. And remember, at that time, Blue Pickens down in Dallas was really pushing compressed natural gas. I don't know if you remember the summer of 2007, gas was $4.49 a gallon. It got everyone's attention, and people were looking, is there another way to power our transportation fleet that perhaps wouldn't be so expensive? Mr. Pickens thought natural gas was the way to do that, but he wanted a big federal investment in the infrastructure to be able to deliver compressed natural gas to vehicles on the road. And I will tell you, at times he could be quite persuasive about that argument. But then we kind of look what has happened in the 15 years in the interim, and market people have chosen and gone a different direction. And that's the testament to all of the electric cars that we now see, and electric bicycles and electric motorcycles, for heaven's sakes. I mean, kind of defeats the purpose of, but it doesn't make any noise, you know what I mean? But here we are. I mean, and clearly there is a transition occurring, and in many ways, one of the things I really like about being on the Energy and Commerce Committee in Congress is it kind of puts me on the front lines of the transition. So this morning we're going to hear from the agency. We're going to hear most recent former Deputy Secretary Mark Menendez, who's going to give us the federal perspective. We're going to hear from Drew Campbell, who spent a lifetime in the automotive industry and has some very significant insights that he will share with us. And then again, we'll transition on to kind of a peek into the future. We always hear the thing that's holding us back on just going to complete electrification of our homes and our transportation side is that we don't have the storage capacity. We love the windmills, but if the wind's not blowing, we need a way to get the power to hold on to the power so we can deliver it when it's needed. So we're going to get that perspective as well. And then I'll kind of wrap it all up at the end, and then we could spend a lot of time on the exhibits. I encourage you to do so. We do have a number of both inside the building and outside the building. And I just have to say, Dr. Smatteris, I came into office about the time University of North Texas acquired this facility, and I kind of feel like we've grown up together. I haven't always done the Energy Summit here. It has, as I pointed out, it was in the parking lot of the Home Depot. We did use your business school because of the high LEED certification that it had right after it opened. I've done it at high schools around in the area, but this seemed to be the logical place. And the year that you did the groundbreaking for the energy lab out on the side of the campus really sort of distilled to be that this is the place to be doing this energy summit. And fortunately for me, University of North Texas has been very accommodating in doing that. So let's see, I had some stuff that I was supposed to tell you. Let me make sure I've done everything. Federal policies must help consumers and taxpayers. Okay, energy efficiency, it's a win-win-win for all of us. And the thing I like about it is it puts the consumer in the driver's seat. As much as we love our friends at the Department of Energy, the consumer is the one who should be in charge. So today, from the Department of Energy, we do have Mark Menendez. He is the most recent former Deputy Secretary of Energy at the United States Department of Energy. And Mr. Menendez and I actually go back in ways. And one of the things I like about his perspective is, yes, he was most recently at the agency, at the Department of Energy, actually worked for a time on the staff at the Energy and Commerce Committee. So my early days on the committee, Mark Menendez was the chief counsel for energy and environment at the United States House of Representatives Committee on Energy and Commerce. He's had experience in the private sector. He was an executive at Berkshire Hathaway and Berkshire Hathaway Energy and American Electric Power. And then during his time as Deputy Secretary, he was responsible for driving transformative energy progress and technology solutions through coordinated planning, management, and innovation. He has been a frequent guest speaker and lecturer when he's been called on to address the nation's energy and environmental policies, utility restructuring, telecommunications, ethics, merger and acquisition, regulatory and legislative processes. A graduate of Louisiana State University, we will hold that against him, both undergraduate and his law degree from LSU. So if we can activate the screen, Mark Menendez, welcome to our Energy Summit. What is this? Robin's not here. Is this our 15th annual Energy Summit? And there's Secretary Menendez. Thank you, sir, for joining us.
Thank you very much, Dr. Burgess, for extending the invitation to me. It's a pleasure to see you. I appreciate your reference to our past working together when you joined the committee. We were common spirits at that time. My recollection was you drove a Prius that you were quite proud of, which sort of one-upped me because at the time, I drove an original Honda Insight, which was a hybrid vehicle that looked like a spacecraft at the time. And I got, quite a bit of ridicule from a lot of people. But when you joined the committee, that certainly took a lot of pressure off of me for having the vision, to embrace new technologies. So again, thank you. I would like to thank Dr. Neal for hosting us. I apologize for not being able to be there. I'm standing in for Secretary Bruyette, who unfortunately cannot make it, but I want everyone to know that my comments are essentially going to be what he was going to tell the group. I'd also just like to say too that I am the former Deputy Secretary of Energy. So the remarks that I give today will not be on behalf of the department, but will be my own remarks, but it'll be based on our collective experience in managing the department over the last 4 years. So with that said, the way that I think about federal energy savings, I categorize them into several areas. First off, you find that, you have these energy savings performance contracts, and this is a congressionally established program that basically puts mandates on the federal government to both save energy and save cost, lower emission standards, increase use of renewables. So Congress is very good about ensuring that your federal departments are saving taxpayers' dollars in the space of energy efficiency, emission reductions, and in the use of renewables. That's an ongoing program. The Department of Energy is the department that measures the progress of all other agencies, and that resides within the Department of Energy's Federal Energy Management Program. So I wanted to let everybody know that from the federal government side, it's doing what it can to save energy, and typically breakthrough technologies sometimes come through what the federal government does on its numerous facilities. So it inures to the benefit of everyone. The other categories I want to talk about are either congressionally mandates on the private sector or voluntary programs that were created by Congress. And these fall into a couple of categories. You have the appliance and equipment efficiency standards. These are congressionally mandated on the private sector. I'll talk more about that. You have the Energy Star program that I'm sure you all have heard. That's congressionally created. It's a voluntary program. Then you have the federal research and development, deployment and commercialization through the department's program offices and our national laboratories. I'll talk more about that. That's how taxpayer dollars are essentially invested in breakthrough technologies. You have building energy codes. Most of these are state and local. Now, Congress is considering imposing national building code standards is under consideration now in Congress, but as of yet, we don't have national building codes. But the department plays a key role in working with industry in setting up a voluntary program for that. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. Then finally, as you know, and I think speakers, the next speaker, Drew, will talk about is, the CAFE standards, the vehicular fuel economy standards. And this is a congressional mandate, imposed on the private sector. So let me begin by talking about the appliance and equipment efficiency standards. As I mentioned, these are standards that are imposed by Congress on the department to every so many years to increase the efficiency standards of a wide range of appliances and equipment that uses electricity. And it's never ending. It's always a review process. It's always ongoing. And Congress put anti-backsliding provisions in place to ensure that progress that had been made, you don't backslide and create inefficient products. Now, as a consequence of this, the department, from administration to administration, always strives to meet the statutory mandates, but over time, they've been very, very difficult to meet. And more than once in my testimony before Congress, I was asked, why is it that you can't meet these statutory deadlines? And you really can't give a good explanation to Congress. And I would pledge, since as Dr. Burgess knows, we were part of passing legislation on these standards. And so it's a matter of, personal pride and interest that we meet these standards. So we did an analysis of the appliance standards that we were developing and which ones took the most time and which ones saved the most energy. Now, this is important because Congress really didn't give priorities on the appliances. They included a bunch of appliances and then gave mandates for time periods. So we studied all of the appliance standards that we had done, since the early days of when the program was created and throughout the years when it was modernized. And what we discovered was that the agency was spending 40% of its time and resources chasing 4% of the earnings. That's right. 40% of the department's time and resources were chasing 4% of the savings. 96% of the energy savings under the congressionally mandated appliance efficiency standards basically took 60% of our time. So we decided that we would issue a process rule to where we would prioritize these. Congress certainly didn't ban us from doing that, and the goal was to help us meet the important statutory deadlines. So we proposed that. My understanding is the current administration is looking at it to see if they're going to keep it in place or not. But that's one way where the department can increase getting energy efficiency savings without spending a lot of time chasing fewer and fewer efficiency savings. The other set of rules, Dr. Burgess had mentioned about the consumers. When you look at these energy efficiency standards, you would hope that you get to consider two additional factors: performance, that the appliance performs the function for which it was designed and for which the consumer purchased it, and you hope that the appliance's costs are coming down. Well, the law doesn't really require that we consider either of those, although you try. And so as a consequence, you find that we heard from the consumers and manufacturers that some of the appliances, while efficient for energy consumption, they elongated the time period. So you might notice now that your brand new washer, can operate for 2 hours, to wash clothes, or your dryer can operate at 2 hours to dry your clothes, or your dishwasher takes 2 hours and 14 minutes to wash. So we heard from the consumers and we thought, great, these are labor-saving appliances, and the purchaser should also be able to use their time efficiently. And so we then, took it upon ourselves to categorize appliances into, fast time or quick time operations. And so we sought to listen to the consumers to where the appliances could be both energy efficient and would perform in the time that the consumer, had come to expect. We did some other things too. On the light bulb rule, the previous administration had looked at the definitions of incandescent light bulbs. Congress had carved out incandescent light bulbs from, the LED rule, if you will. And it's clear that Congress intended to have incandescent bulbs play some role. So we basically had looked at making sure that we allowed the consumers the choice of incandescents. Some of the studies that we saw, LEDs, they save a tremendous amount of electricity when they are used. There's no question about that. They are cooler. And when you put them and use them in your home, if you have a natural gas heating system, some of the studies show that your electricity costs might go down, but your natural gas use might go up if your heating system uses natural gas, because the incandescent bulbs typically were warmer. So you don't hear a lot about that, but there's always policymakers have to balance that. And so we were looking at things like those rules. Let me talk to you a little bit about the Energy Star program. This is the labeling and certification program that is created by Congress. It's voluntary. It's not mandatory. And it was to be a shared program between DOE and EPA. And until 2009, DOE essentially set the standards and devised testing, and EPA did essentially the labeling and the marketing of it. That changed in 2009 when, through agreement with DOE essentially ceded to EPA, both setting the standards for the appliance and to do some of the testing. And so we've heard from industry that it's really difficult. It's a great program. The industry loves the program. The consumers typically like to see the label on the appliances. But if you're a manufacturer, it's very difficult to work with both agencies to accomplish both increased standards and working in industry to where you can be able to put in place the manufacturing process and the product to be able to meet those standards, to be able to get the Energy Star program. Let me talk to you more now about the research and development that your taxpayer dollars go to. At the Department of Energy, the largest program office is the Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy Program Office. Congress appropriates it's now up to several $billion a year. And that's the largest of all of the energy programs. So your monies go to energy efficiency programs, development of solar, wind, geothermal, biomass. They have a vehicular office as well to help develop technologies for electrification of vehicles, as well as the potential use of hydrogen as a mode of fuel for vehicles. And these offices are very, very good at measuring their progress. This office has been around for a while. It's kept from administration to administration. And as Dr. Burgess knows, that in order to continue to justify the request for these appropriations for these programs, they have to come up with what's called Congressional Justifications. And each of these offices really excel at this. You can go back in time and you can see that whether you're looking at solar or wind, these technologies, they have, whether it's increased efficiency, whether it's increased production, whether it's the levelized cost of energy over time, they have been gathering this data, and you can see how the federal government has been making progress spending your dollars. Under our leadership, we thought it important to combine this office with the other program offices. So the electricity office, for example, fossil, nuclear, or even our cybersecurity office. We put in place collaborative efforts to be able to share the expertise. So, one of the initiatives that began in the prior administration to ours was the Grid Modernization Initiative. That was a great program. It was a collaborative effort between, say, Office of Electricity, Fossil, et cetera, where you could have generation get together with modern grid initiatives, and together you could have more of a comprehensive approach to ensure that your taxpayer dollars were spent, very efficiently as well. And since these offices really dealt with the applied laboratories, it was a way that industry could likewise benefit from it. Let me tell you a little bit about the laboratories. I mentioned our applied labs. The Department of Energy has 17 national laboratories. 3 of them, if you will, are applied. You have 3 weapons labs. These grew out of the Manhattan Project. And then you have 11, quote, basic science labs. Now, over time, the science labs have developed quite a few applied programs. And indeed, the applied labs do some basic research. But those 3 labs that you'll hear us talk about are the National Renewable Energy Laboratory in Golden, Colorado. You have the National Energy Technology Laboratory, both outside of Pittsburgh and in Morgantown, West Virginia. That's the only government-owned, government-operated lab. The other labs are all government owned, but privately operated. So we contract out with the private sector to manage those labs. And then we have the Idaho National Laboratory in Boise Falls in Idaho. Now at that lab, we actually have, we do our grid security analysis there. We actually have a model grid up, and that's where, we do a lot of our research and development at that laboratory. The other labs that are key are the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory in Washington. You have Oak Ridge National Laboratory is a tremendously diversified laboratory that the Energy Department works with. And even our weapons laboratories help us out with respect to grid security and grid operations, grid protection, and those kinds of things. And then finally, the way that we spend this money is through what's called funding opportunity announcements, FOAs. And what happens is working typically with industry and with other policy leaders and thinkers and universities and not-for-profits and across industry, you develop these requests for new technological breakthroughs. It's all technologically driven. And these are typically competitively bid. The applicants apply. It goes through a very thorough examination process. Typically, these are large sums of money. And so it's a collaborative process. Private industry will get together with the university, we'll get together with a couple of national laboratories, and they all bid for this money. And that's how the department pushes money out the door. That's our job, that's our business. So it does us no good not to get the money out. The money's appropriate. Congress did all the hard work getting us there. And so your department spends a lot of time developing these things. If you ever have a great idea about what it would be good to have the government help you with, contact the department, contact these program offices and work with them. And they will develop a potential funding opportunity. You'll have to compete with everybody else and it'll be open to everyone. But that's how the industry and private sector can work with your Department of Energy to help push money out in the direction where you may find some breakthroughs. I'd like to talk now too about the what we have at DOE, and now this is through several administrations. This is a better building initiative, and some of you in the audience might actually participate in this. This is a voluntary program because, as I mentioned, we don't have a national building code yet. We may if this Congress decides to do it. But this has been quite a great program. It was always fun to go and speak to the members of the Better Buildings Initiative. This has been an enormous success. It's voluntary. And over the years, let me just read you some of these statistics. Since we began it, and again, it really started before our administration, but more than 950 commercial, public, industrial, and residential organizations participate in this. They have saved more than 2.2 quadrillion BTUs of energy. That's like $13 billion, 130 million metric tons of carbon dioxide. It includes 30 of the Fortune's 100 companies, 12 of top 25 employers, 12% of the US manufacturing participates in this. So it covers 17 agencies participate, 8 of our national laboratories, and even over 80 state and local governments. So it's worthwhile to go on the website and see that, and perhaps get involved if you're not already involved. But again, a voluntary program established at your department. We talked about energy savings, about CAFE standards. And this is one area that this is not a DOE program. We really don't play that much of a role in that program, I can say. Where we do play a role would be through our vehicular office, to develop technologies to increase energy efficiencies. And of course, we do R&D that the automobile industry, helps us with. I'd like to now just talk about, while we've been talking about energy efficiency, today you'll hear energy efficiency mentioned in the context of, hitting net zero carbon emission programs. How do you get to net zero? And typically when you look at these net zero plans, there's an assumption or a presumption that we're going to electrify much of our economy. And the reason that we need to do that is because electricity, I'm sure as the developer of the Harley-Davidson all-electric motorcycle outside your building, you can get somewhere a whole lot faster with an electric bike than you can with the internal combustion engine. So electric engines are simply more energy efficient than internal combustion engines as a general rule. So that's why you hear so much about electrification of the economy. Well, in anticipation of that, we used the Idaho National Laboratory that I had mentioned before, where we have the grid set up. We put together automobile manufacturers, battery manufacturers, grid operators, and we were doing. We tasked them to do an analysis of, let's assume that the majority of people within a certain city, owns an electric vehicle at some point. With the battery technology and recharging technology at the time, what would the behavior patterns be? You assume people would charge their battery perhaps overnight. That's fine. That made sense. That's not peak demand typically. So the grid we saw could handle that. However, if you commuted of a distance to where you had to come back, say at 5 to 6 o'clock, that's typically peak demand time on the electric grid. And everybody needed a fast charge or a charger on their battery because you might want to drive out to supper or do something else. Well, we wanted to see what impact that would have on the grid. And guess what? We did find that it's almost impossible, to meet the demand with the current way that the grid is built and operated. And the conclusion was by these scientists was, well, we need to manage load and we need to shed load. And I talked to them, I said, well, but that's really not anything new. I mean, I come from energy companies. That's how you manage load today. I said, the reason we're looking at this is to find where we need breakthrough technologies so that we can create, a new way forward. So if it's a fast charge technology, that we can do that. To be sure, people can decide when they want to use their appliances, et cetera. But the goal here of the labs is to try to help, whether you're urban planners, where you're in the electricity, vehicle market, whether you're the consumer groups, it's how is it that we can put together an interoperative grid to where you can anticipate an increased electrification of our economy and not overload the system to where we go through what California and ERCOT goes during extreme weather events, but you certainly wouldn't want a routine use of electricity event to cause any kind of brownout or blackout. The other studies show, I'd like to highlight one of the Lawrence Livermore Foundation. Lawrence Livermore is one of our weapons laboratories. They have a foundation. And the state of California asked them to evaluate their plan to get to net zero by, I think it's 2040. Can we do it? And if so, what are the costs? So they have been looking at this for several years, and they've updated this recently. And I commend anybody interested in it. You can find it online. It's the Lawrence Livermore getting to net zero, I guess, or getting to neutral emissions. And it's focused on California, but I think it's a good read for everybody trying to figure out whether or not, as a policymaker or even as a consumer, what do we need to do? Is it even possible? And they said, well, they assume certain things. One, they assume we're never going to go to 100% renewables within anybody's lifetime that we know. It's just we're not there yet. It's not to say that we can't use a lot of renewables, but it's not going to be 100% renewables. We're going to have fossil fuels. We'll have for the foreseeable future. So they assumed that. They also assumed no policy changes, no carbon tax, no tax on polluters, just, basically policies stay the same. And it assumes current technology. And it's fascinating read. What they concluded was that California can get there. It's going to cost them. It'll cost them between $5 and $15 billion per year, but they can get there. And the way that they get there is, first thing they do is they put capture technology wherever there's the source of carbon emissions. You capture it, you sequester it. They have to build pipelines for geologic storage. You have to develop the geologic storage pipelines, but essentially the capture and the transmission technology and even the storage technology is there today. First thing. Two, land use. You can use a lot of biomass in California. This requires forest management, wetlands management, but landfill management. You can use methane, renewable methane. But these are all things that you should invest a lot of time and energy in. These are controversial. Forest management in California has always been controversial. But again, if net zero is your goal, then you're forced to have to deal with these issues. And then finally, they decided you still can't get there by doing all that. You have to have direct air capture technology. You have to develop the technology to really pull the CO2 directly out of the atmosphere. And then you sequester it or you create new products for carbon. So that is a roadmap. And I just like to tell audiences that usually provokes some discussion. But, as a policymaker, those are the kind of studies that actually you find helpful because you don't have to really lead off any discussion with the carbon tax. You can if you want to, but you don't have to. So I just find that this actually furthers the conversation in reaching net zero. And then finally, just allow me to mention some of the initiatives that we created. We came to the conclusion quickly, as does any person who thinks about this for about a minute and a half, is that the next breakthrough technology to really increase the renewables, these variable renewable resources onto the grid is, storage technologies, whether it's batteries, whether it's other kinds of storage. We need that breakthrough technology. So early on, we kicked off the Energy Storage Grand Challenge. Our motto there is innovate here in the US, make it here, deploy it everywhere. So it's a combination of electrochemical, mechanical, it's all of the above. And I'm happy to say that this administration, the current administration, is continuing that. We also did a plastics challenge initiative, and that also is being kept in place. That is, we're trying to prevent plastics from getting into the streams, into the rivers, into the oceans. We're trying to figure out technologies to remove it. We're trying to upcycle plastics. We're trying to make greater plastics that we have today. We're trying to recycle plastics. And finally, we're trying to commercialize the deployment of all these technologies so that we can basically collect, treat, make better products, reuse, make higher quality, commercialize everything, and address the plastics issue, for all. And then finally, one of the institutions that we created really under, I had a big interest in this, was cybersecurity. We do think that as you make your grid more flexible and modern, you also are increasing the vulnerabilities to it. So cybersecurity, to me, is the biggest threat, to our grid operation. And so we established the Cybersecurity Manufacturing Innovation Institute, and it was a highly competitive bid, Dr. Burgess, I want you to know, and Dr. Neal, I want you to know as well, you have great universities in Texas, and the winner of this institute was none other than the University of Texas at San Antonio. So you can add that university to your list of great universities in Texas, and it is being funded today. That we assume that as you electrify the economy, you're going to electrify the manufacturing systems, obviously. But as you electrify, as I mentioned, you potentially make it greater vulnerability to threats. And so we wanted to ensure that as we electrify the manufacturing base, we have the security measures in place and the technologies there to where we can protect our manufacturing base. Because as you know, coming out of COVID, all nations have decided that we're all more secure if we have our critical supply chains domestically sourced, that we don't have to rely on other countries to give us the things that are basic to our manufacturing and our energy systems, of course, as well as our national security interests. So with that, Dr. Burgess, I will end my discussion, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mark. Let me turn this back on. Thank you, Mark. A very thorough recitation of everything, all things going on in the Department of Energy. We appreciate you bringing that to us. We have been going, I should prove that. I thought our mayor Dan was here, Mayor Hudson arrived. Don't see him now. I know we poked his hand in earlier. I just wanted to acknowledge that he was with us as well. Just ask the audience, Eric has a microphone if there are any questions for the Deputy Secretary, and we have a few minutes to entertain those now.
Yes, sir.
When we go to more electricity, get power and everything,
How does that increase our vulnerability to attack?
I'll let Mark address that, but I think that was one of the things he kind of ended on. As you pump up your reliance on the grid, it does increase your vulnerability. And the Center for Cybersecurity that was recently established at the University of Texas, San Antonio. Thank you, Will Hurd. That is a very acute focus right now. So Mark, please let you address that as well.
Well, thank you very much for that question. It's a fascinating question, I find. So what we discovered when we got over to the department, efforts have been underway for some time to, quote, modernize our grid. When what we discovered is something called the Federal Acquisition Regulations, or the Public Bid Law. And generally, that means that if you get a low-cost bidder as a federal government, you have to sign that contract. Well, what we discovered at the department, one thing I didn't mention is the department runs basically 4 fairly large utilities, if you will. You've heard of Bonneville Power, you've heard of the Western Power Administration, no doubt. These essentially function as utilities. Well, they require transformers, large transformers. Some of the largest transformers in the United States are on wires owned by the federal government. And guess what we found? We found that the largest transformers, they're not manufactured in the United States. You know where they're manufactured? China. And guess what? The transformers now are state of the art. They use now industrial control systems, IT systems. They have now the ability, much like anything that uses IT or industrial control systems, anything that uses Wi-Fi or the internet, they can be vulnerable. So we decided that we were going to take action, and that's why the president issued an executive order basically protecting the bulk power system or electric grid from using equipment that's manufactured from certain countries, including China. So that's one thing we did. The other thing that you find is that for the technologies that we use, a lot of them are outsourced. You discover that the solar panels are not really made in the United States. Windmill component parts typically are outsourced. A lot of things are assembled in the United States, but a lot of it is outsourced. And we don't have the supply chains in the United States to do this. And so what we were discovering was that some of our even inverters, come from China, for example. And again, these things can be turned off and on from a remote source. We don't necessarily have any evidence that they're doing that, but those are the areas that you discover when you get to the department. You may know them, in the private industry, but certainly as policymakers look at this, this is where you find these things out. And so then you're left with the task of trying to figure out the best ways to address this. You want to modernize your grid, but of course you do not want to give away any security in the modernization of the grid.
Yes, and I think as you mentioned, the Livermore study of net zero and the requirement to have direct air capture, do they include any pricing considerations for the cost per ton to do direct air that would make it feasible to do that at the gigaton level?
That's a good question. Let me need to think about that for a minute. I think they were able to get the cost down to, I don't know if it's $85, a ton on that, but they did factor in the cost in the total cost. So the $5 to $15 billion per year is where they factored that computation. And now that's a wide range. And so when you read it, you'll see most people say it'll be about $10 billion. So if you're in California and you're on the budget committees, you would think I need to come up with at least $10 billion per year for the net zero program. But I can't remember specifically. For some reason, I'm thinking $80 or $85. I know that when you look at a price on carbon that changes behavior patterns, the World Bank does a study on that. And generally, at least the last time I looked, you could go to markets to buy carbon credits at $35 maybe or so. The World Bank has said that is too low to affect behavior. You need to push the cost up to about $85 if you're going to impose a cost to affect behavior. That's when you're going to get, and by behavior, I'm talking about actual emission reductions, right? We're talking about emission reductions to be able to hit net zero. So that's a long-winded answer to your question, to your direct question, but that's what I recall on cost.
No, that's fine. Thank you. I'll get it and looking up the report. So thank you.
I think we have time for one more question.
probably also worth mentioning that when we first did this summit in 2005, direct air capture was not in anyone's vocabulary. And I rather expect over the next 15 years, we'll probably see the cost of that, probably see the productivity increase and the cost come down, just like so many other things.
Thank you for your time and presentation. Appreciate you being here with us. My question involves nuclear power. It's been discussed very briefly at these summits before, but never usually by the presenter, but by one of the attendees. I have a little bit of experience in nuclear power in the past. I consider it a very reliable, durable, dependable, and sustainable source of energy. What's the interest, either nationally or statewide, in nuclear power?
Well, thank you very much for that question. In our domestic electricity markets, what we see is with the rise of the RTOs and the ISOs, we generally have market rules that are in place that no longer really provide for the capital structure for utilities to invest in any large baseload nuclear power. We are building in the United States one AP 1000, which was Westinghouse's state-of-the-art some years ago. That's in Georgia at the Vogtle plant. But our energy markets, and that, by the way, is in Georgia, they do not have an RTO or an ISO. They don't have like an ERCOT there. So they are able to invest in and build nuclear power. Now, everybody knows that certainly the International Energy Administration, Dr. Fatih Birol, if any countries are going to get to net zero, they've got to go nuclear because the energy intensity level is a good thing, and you can get electricity to a whole lot more people with a whole lot less infrastructure and investment today, because these nuclear plants are licensed for 20, 40, 60, 80 years over time. The cost of electricity over time it's too good of a deal to pass up. So now is the time to be investing in this. Now, so it's very difficult in the US to be able to build any of these plants. In fact, again, unless there's economic changes or a mandate by the federal government, we're just not going to build any more of these. Or the ISOs and RTOs either remove the capacity markets or figure out how to get adequate capacity pricing in the cost of electricity. It might cost a little bit more, but at least you get nuclear emission-free, energy for the long haul. Now, where the breakthrough technologies are is in small modular reactors. So in anticipation of, rather than upscaling technology that typically you try to do when you have some breakthrough technology, we're trying to downscale nuclear. That has a lot of interest. You have this, again, we got to drive down cost. We were very bullish on small modular reactors. Congress funds research in small modulars. We're looking at micro technologies. This might accommodate a modern grid, certainly in remote areas. The Department of Defense is interested in micro technologies. That could be a pull for the development of this technology. And even Congress has recognized that we need to continue to look forward in new types of nuclear technologies. If we can get away from, pressurized water reactors, go to maybe something traveling wave, molten salt. There's other technologies that DOE is funding, and Congress has actually recognized the importance to do that. So the DOE is looking at all these other technologies, and we must have spent at least $1 billion a year or so, on pursuing these kinds of new technologies. Now, the importance of the United States in maintaining its nuclear leadership is a very important one, because other countries too have net zero goals. And so they're looking for nuclear. They want to use US technology. US technology typically has been leading. However, Russia can build nuclear plants with their technology. China has demonstrated that they can do it. China has demonstrated they can build an AP 1000 before we can build an AP 1000. And it's a Westinghouse technology. But these other countries are going around the world selling their technology. Now, what's wrong with that? Okay, well, it's not the US technology. So the relationship, this 80-year relationship that this country will be with China or Russia. And the US, will be out. the other consequences of that is that neither China nor Russia has the Atomic Energy Act, which has provision 123, those so-called 123 agreements, where countries that want to use the U.S. nuclear technology developed in the U.S., they would agree to non-proliferation agreements and non-enrichment, so that you can't weaponize, you can't develop weapons through the use of civilian nuclear use. So that's when I hear a question like you asked, I upscale the argument to make it not only a technological one, but also a electric market issue here that the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission should look at, the Congress should look at, and ERCOT should look at, and it's also an national security issue. So, not everybody is pro-nuclear, but when they hear me and others talk in those terms, you suddenly take a different view of nuclear, and it's a good thing. So thank you for the question.
I just add, we're actually having a hearing on that later this week with 4 of the nuclear regulatory commissioners. I don't think fifth position has been filled yet, but that is, the hiccup has always been long-term nuclear storage and using a technology such as the molten salts, thorium salts, where you don't have the problems with proliferation. You don't have the problems with long-term nuclear storage. Likely is going to be the way of the future. Unfortunately for us here in Texas, whatever the Southeast Nuclear Project down in Houston actually froze up the same time as our windmills and our natural gas pipelines. And so when everything froze during that 1 week of winter we had, it was a doozy, and we actually lost nuclear capability during that time, which is really unfortunate because that was nuclear's time to say, hey, we're here, we're ready, we're producing electrons, come get them. But it didn't actually work out. Mark, I can't thank you enough for agreeing to be with us this morning. I didn't ask you, where are you originating from this morning?
I'm coming to you from our nation's capital in McLean, Virginia, in my home.
Very good. Thank you for agreeing to fill in when the secretary couldn't make it. Certainly value the friendship that we've developed over the years, and look forward to working with you in the future. Big hand for Mark and Enzo.
Thank you very much for having me, and I enjoyed the questions. Thank you.
Now, Drew Campbell and I met. Where are we waiting? Oh, you just want to get by. Drew Campbell and I met his tenure at the Automobile Dealers Association. I think one morning we butted heads on a radio program with Ed Wallace back in the 2008 financial meltdown. But Drew has been a part of this discussion because of this vast encyclopedic knowledge that he has about automobiles and what's gone on in the past, what's going to go on in the future. I hear about states that are going to ban the internal combustion engine in just a few years' time. I actually did take a trip to Havana with the People to People program one year, and I remember all the 57 Chevys. I wonder if that's the future that we're going to have, is holding on to our internal combustion engines. But maybe you can give us some insight on that. But now at Capital Insight, I really appreciate Drew making time to join us.
Oh, you bet. I'm just gonna talk loud. I got a big old voice. And I think I've told y'all before, my daddy was an Episcopal priest, so I know how to project my voice. I bring you greetings from the automobile world. The world that's getting ready to be electrified is what they tell us. If you look at the major manufacturers, everything from Volkswagen to General Motors, Ford, because they're all talking about having anywhere from 20 to 40% of the product they offer to sell being all electric. This isn't hybrids, this isn't plug-ins like a hybrid, which has got an electric capability. This is totally electric vehicles by 2035. And as the Congressman mentioned, California has talked about banning the sale of new ICE, what they're called ICE vehicles now, internal combustion engine vehicles. by 2035. So in other words, you won't be able to buy a new car with an internal combustion engine in California. And we're seeing a very rapid expansion into electrification. What does it mean? What does it mean for you? What does it mean for the grid? What does it mean for all of us? And basically, what it means is that we're going to see a transformation of how we operate our automobiles and the relationship we have with our automobiles. I want you to think about this, that right now, most of you, I would assume, anybody driving an electric car, totally electric? Anybody thinking about buying a totally electric car? Good. Basically, when you think about Texas, so that's what I was talking about with cars. You got 23 million vehicles registered in the state of Texas. 23 million. We sell about 2 million new vehicles a year. So it takes about 10 years to turn the fleet. Okay? 10 years. We have 66,000 totally electric vehicles registered in the state of Texas right now. And we'll probably sell somewhere around 18,000 this year, which means that for our fleet to turn electric, it's going to take some kind of push. And where's that push going to come from? It'll come from the government. And it'll come in terms of subsidies, tax credits, things like that. I know Tesla and General Motors have run out of their tax credits. So when you go buy a new Tesla, you no longer get $7,500. But when you go buy that new F-150, you get $7,500. Ford still has about 2/3 of their credits available. But it's going to take that kind of push to get people to get into electric cars. But you're going to see a confluence of the manufacturers moving that way, as well as the government inducing us to go that way. Now, when you think about electric car, what will be the biggest difference in your relationship with the car? You won't be going to a gas station anymore. You'll be going to a charging station periodically, but you'll treat it like your phone. When you come home at night, you'll plug it in. It'll be charged, ready to go the next day. Now, I would be willing to bet there's not anybody in this room that drives more than about 50 miles a day. And there isn't an electric car or vehicle made today that can't do that, sustain you your life. In other words, it can get you 50 miles a day without having to charge it. That charge it at night, but not during the day. Those are the big differences of how things are going to be. Now, servicing, talk to a Ford dealer, and he points to his Explorer, and he says there's about 658 parts that are in a Ford Explorer, ICE, internal combustion engine Explorer. He said in the electric, be about 53 parts. You have fewer moving parts, less service. It all sounds wonderful. It is. It's going to be fascinating to watch this transformation. Because you're talking about transforming about 20% of the GDP of the United States is totally related to the automobile. You're going to change that whole system, that whole relationship. But what will the benefits be? Well, obviously, the benefits are going to be that we're going to reduce carbon dioxide emissions, that we're going to reduce the number of gallons of oil and gasoline that we have to do. The flip side of it is that we're going to need more electric energy. And in so doing, what does that mean? Well, you probably saw in June that the PUC and the ERCOT put out a warning, said, hey, turn your air conditioner up to 78. It's a little sketchy right now. Well, the notice you'll get is, hey, don't charge your car during the day. Charge it at night. You get those kinds of notices. But the reality is that as our battery technology improves, and it has improved tremendously since we first started, that means that you're going to be able to get a better extension on the miles that you can get. You won't be fearful about getting in your car and driving, say, to Florida to go to Disney. That was always kind of our go-to thing when people talk about alternative fuel vehicles. Can I put the family in the car and drive to Disney World, not worry about filling my car up and heading to Mississippi? If I can do that, then this will work. Well, on that side of it, today we've got close to 200,000 gasoline stations across the United States. Right now, we've got about 34,000 charging stations. But we know, the industry knows, I'm talking about the OEMs, the manufacturers know that before you're going to be comfortable, you're going to have some charging stations out there. The federal government knows that you're going to have some charging stations out there, and so does our state government. And it'll be interesting because basically what you'll do is you'll have a little charging station, go hook your car up, put your credit card in, pay for it, and be on your way. Very similar to what we're doing now, but infrastructure is not really good. So the point that I'm trying to make in all this is that, yes, the industry has embraced this. They're going to move forward with it. They feel like it's the right thing to do. And you're going to see that the government, both the state and federal level, get involved. Before I go on, I mean, see if they have any questions, anybody thoughts, concerns, just a minute.
How long does it take to charge that fast?
Well, it depends upon which one you get. You know, Tesla, Ford, they're all a little bit different. But for most of them, if you're at what we call a level 2 charging station, it takes about 20 minutes to get a charge of 50, 40, 50 miles. So if you sit there for 30 minutes charging the car, you can get an 80% charge, which means you get roughly 240 to 280 miles.
Because we just got back from a 7,767 mile trip to Washington, Oregon, and California.
Well, what did you drive? You know,
Honda Odyssey,
oh, good.
but it
Well-
wasn't electric, and so I was wondering if we had one about finding all these stations, but if it only took 20 minutes or say 30 to charge it.
It's long enough for you to go in, go to the restaurant, get a coke, come back, you'll be pretty much charged. Now, I do know, I don't have an electric car, but I have apps on my phone that show me where all charging stations are. So that, you know, I do that out of curiosity, just see where they are. And I've got friends of mine, coworkers, who go to New Mexico up to a cabin, they cut out the mountains all the time. They go and there's no problem finding places to charge. Now, you have to watch because they're not out there plentiful. But that will change. That will change. You're going to drive that change. The consumer's going to drive that change. And the reality is that you're going to find that the driving experience is quite a bit different.
All the charging stations that are needed, you are factoring in the fact that the vast majority of the charging is going to be done in your own garage, at your house.
Oh, no question. No question.
So if you're saying that, but even with that, we're going to need thousands of charges.
You're going to need the charging station for 2 reasons. One, for the charge. The other is you, the driver, you, the consumer, is going to feel confident. I'm not going to get stranded out there with my house. And years ago, you guys didn't see me up here before. I used to drive a Volkswagen diesel at 70 miles a gallon. It's great. But when I first started driving, you couldn't find a diesel. I mean, you had to know where the diesel stations were. Essentially, that's where we are. Yes.
Gentleman out here that has a Tesla, it's got it's driven for 150,000 miles, and he can give you good information on what to expect from his experience.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'll also tell you that this is an older model. Subsequently, the newer models, they charge faster, they hold better. It's your lifestyle changes, but not a whole lot. It's like I said, it's like your phone. You know, for $500, you can put an adapter in your garage that'll get you to a level 2 charge, so it charges a little bit faster as opposed to a credit card. But basically, what you'll be doing is plugging your car in at night. When you get up the next morning, and you'll have an 80-90% charge, you're ready to go. But if you're traveling, that's where you're going to need to find the charging stations. And I think that's real important. Yes, sir.
Do you have any sense of what the cost of this conversion is going to be to the United States?
When you say, all right, overall,
Overall,
slowly but surely changed, and abandoned, and the cleanup that will entail. It'll be a big cost, but it's an opportunity, it's an investment opportunity, and you'll see funding come from both the federal government and from private industry. I know that there are 3 major manufacturers right now who are in the process of trying to get approved by the federal government to put in charging stations and start putting them in. And, I'm sure we'll see the 7-Eleven, Lucky's and places like that. But you have to wrap your head around the fact that we have 23 million cars and trucks. We have 7 million cars, new cars, 7 million cars and trucks right here in Dallas, Fort Worth. How long will it take to make that transformation? How big will the demand be for charging stations? And will it be enough to sustain the investment? And it'll be things like that. This will be a slow process. But the exciting part about it is we do have the private sector, the original equipment manufacturers, Ford, et cetera. They are now dedicated to getting this done. And I really think the most important thing is that F-150. The reason I say that is that out of the top 10 best-selling vehicles in the United States, out of the top 10, the first 5 are trucks. They're all trucks. So if you don't get the truck section of the car market moving, you're missing out on 50% of the market. But I know that Ford has announced that over 100,000 F-150s already been ordered. They're hoping that they can make delivery by next spring. Anybody else?
What's the lifetime on the battery pack?
Well, I know that Tesla guarantees them up to a million miles for 8 years. On the Leaf, it's 200,000 miles. And that is one aspect at this point that is kind of a sore spot, because like on the Leaf, when that battery pack goes, it's about a $7,500 investment. Yeah. Now you're saving all this money because you're not going to buy gasoline, and you're looking at spending, around 15% on fuel compared to gasoline. So you have all the savings to the life of the car until you come to the end of the batteries. If you have to buy a new battery, that's where all your savings goes up. Yes, sir.
Battery cost should come down, so by the time the battery goes dead, it shouldn't be $7,500.
We in business, we call it betting on the gun. Yeah, that's the hope. And I'll tell you, when Tesla first came with their product and with their batteries and capabilities, it has vastly improved. Price has come down. And I think that with Ford, with the big boys getting into the business, yes, the price will come down. And the technologies, I think, will progress fast. I know that in and of itself, the battery technology is part of what I know is going to help us with the grid. Because as opposed to shipping coal and oil in on rail lines, and shipping batteries, big batteries, with electricity stored in it, and they'll be changing them out in our communities so that we can power our own homes and our businesses, et cetera. The battery technology has, but it's improving every day. It really is. It's very exciting. But to give you an idea of what's going on in the world, Norway had 79% of all the new cars were electric. And Norway, people pick on Norway. It's only got 5.5 million people in it. But the point being is that they have determined they want to go totally electric. And in so doing, Germany and the rest of the EU are doing the same thing. They're doing it really twofold. One is that they're pounding the manufacturers with carbon taxes and fines for creating cars that produce carbon. The second thing they're doing is they're offering really good sales incentives to buy new cars that are electric forward. And so basically you've got China and Europe leading the world in terms of how they're electrifying the automobile business. But I think we'll catch catch up, and we'll catch up pretty quick. Yes, sir.
So I know that China is leading in automotive electrification, but aren't they building a coal plant a week to power that?
Well, the last time I looked, and I only looked because I get bored, I've looked up extraneous, it's about 100 coal plants a week, not a month, a year. That they're putting on right now. Yeah, that's exactly right.
So where's the game?
Well, I think it has more to do with, not so much that we're gonna make China, India, et cetera, do anything. We're gonna do what's right.
Yeah, but we can't possibly overcome that.
Well, they will eventually. They say electrify, but, to the whole point, and you get into the grid and where some electricity comes from and all those kinds of things. You think about nuclear power, Germany had probably the most advanced nuclear power center for the last 25 years. They had 7 different nuclear power plants that provided them with most of their electricity. They went away from all. They closed them all. And they've gone to solar and to wind power. And I think that we as a people, as a culture, have determined that it's in our best interest to try to do what we can to reduce carbon production. And, what the Chinese do, what the Indians do, we can't do anything about that. And my hope is it's recapture, what they talk about, because when I think about recapture, I think about Mr. Freeze. Remember him and Batman? He had a machine that could freeze things. I think, hey, just pull enough carbon dioxide out. We'll freeze everything. Yes, sir.
Yeah, how will electric car contribute to maintenance of our highway system?
Well, the way they will is there'll be I know at the state level, we've had the last 2 sessions, fees were introduced, talking about, and it'll be somewhere around $150 to $200 a year. It'll be collected on electric vehicles every year contributed to the highway fund.
Yes, sir. When you renew your license plates and your inspection sticker, would be the logical
I
time to
call
apply that.
it regulated state.
They are building a lot of coal plants in China. They also have a timetable for decommissioning. They have a long-term timetable. They build more solar panels and wind farms. So I know it's not good, but the reason we should continue on, I would think, is we can't. The better we do it, the more leverage we have to put pressure on them. Right now, we can't. But if we show as an example, and now that we've joined back to support, I think we can do that.
I think we can do that without the parent support. I from a sense of responsibility, if this provides for us a cleaner way for us to have private transportation, and the technology's there, I don't understand why we wouldn't embrace this.
I am obviously not happy with the coal plants that China's building. On the other hand, they have recently stated a price on carbon for their electricity grid, which apparently doesn't have a lot of light right now. But one of the things they're trying to do is collect data on usage for the creation of carbon dioxide emissions, so that they will be able to in the future possibly, hopefully, increase that price to get an accurate accounting of how much carbon dioxide.
Yeah, I think the technology is going to be a possible way to do that. And not the throw rocks and tanks, but we still have about 15% of our electricity created by coal. We're in the process of transforming away from it, but it's still, when you can take a little lignite and burn it and make electricity at 3.4 cents a kilowatt, it's kind of hard to walk away from. But that's the direction. And the interesting thing to me, though, and I think the most important message I would leave with you is that the industry itself has made this determination. That this wasn't brought to them like catalytic converters or seatbelts or everything. stepped in and said, okay, my God, thanks, sir, you're going to do this. These are things that they have determined, looking into the future, that they need to be in this space. And I can tell you, in 2013, we were at a national meeting and Laker cars here recently up. And there was a conversation about Tesla to that. And today, again, total transformation. They're seeing today, I mean, all of us are talking about the fact that they're ready to start moving towards not even manufacturing ICE cars. Now, follow a small segment of the overall sales team, but the point being is they're moving in that direction. And so I think that it behooves all of us as consumers to learn everything we can about cars, electric cars, and what this means and how it's going to work, and not be afraid of it. Really not be afraid of it. Because trust me, you get a Tesla, which I have, and you turn it on to AV, autonomous vehicle, you sweat through your shirt, but you just watch it. It's amazing. It's amazing what technology is doing and where it's taking us. Yes, ma'am.
So I was wondering, do you think that part of the reason why these industries are wanting to push for electric vehicles does have something to do with the European market really putting so much pressure and really wanting to have more electric cars in their countries?
It's a combination of things. The EU is adopting a far more aggressive approach towards carbon tax. They also have they've adopted stricter emissions testing, not testing, but goals for their countries. That's part of it. Another part of this, and this is where I go off script and say something you shouldn't know. Volkswagen really embarrassed themselves with their diesel standard. And they are doing anything and everything to refurbish their brand. They're the largest manufacturer of vehicles in Europe and China, and subsequently, they're really out in front of us. But the most important thing is they think in the long run, when you think about it, if you've got like the Explorer and you've got a platform that you're building this Explorer, how much cheaper can you put a car together with 53 cars as opposed to 600? It's just, for them, they can see a reduction in the number of people it takes to put the cars together, the amount of money it takes, the really, really big expenses there. And as we continue to make modifications on that, you're going to see the price of that come down. Yes, ma'am.
You ready for the laugh? I have not looked at any of the electric cars, but do they have SUV type size cars in electric?
They do. Tesla's got the only one that's out there right now, but there are a number of them in the works that very quickly you're going to see them. Like the Explorer, like the Expedition, like the Tahoe, you're going to see them electrified.
There is a Chevy Bolt out there. Coaster has one. It's not truly an SUV, but it's bigger. It's bigger. And Drew, you touched on autonomous vehicles, and you just kind of give us a look into the future. Are we going to be allowed to drive our cars in the future, or
Well,
is that going to be done for us?
You know, again, it's a lot like electrification of cars. Autonomous, or what we call AV technology, is still in its infancy. And there are about 7 or 8 different cities where they have pilot projects going on. They have a number of, like out here at the airport, they do a lot of in-house, if you will, autonomous vehicle delivery of products and things like that. I think we're still in the infancy of this. I know that the industry was very excited about this about 2-3 years ago. And we all saw this wave coming. The wave is all still a little bit confusing. The biggest thing you got to overcome is, so I got an AV car, which is all really good. It's got to read the highway. Well, not all highways can you read, number one. And then the other part of this is that it doesn't have any, very few other vehicles to talk to. And that's, the dream is it'll all be AV. All the cars will be talking to each other. The highways will be set up with receptors, so, you know, the cars are on the highways or the other cars, and you keep from having collision. And basically what it is like what they have in airplanes. A mid-air collision device that keeps you from colliding. But we're still a long way off, and I know here in Texas, we took a very aggressive tone of passing a law that said, hey, we're gonna follow this. And so whatever this, but that will allow the industry to continue to grow and that incubate. But I know that Tesla's probably the most aggressive. Mercedes-Benz has what they call AB3. And really, when you think about it, it's a real sophisticated cruise control. That's all it is. Keeps you from bumping into people and things like that. I know in the higher end cars, they have collision warnings. They have actually where the car, if it thinks you're going off the road, pull you back on the road, those kinds of things. But you know, full autonomy, we're not there. We're not there yet. All right. Anybody have any other questions?
One last one. You get, my grandkids are trying to get me to get, that's maybe, they want to take my key away from me. I see these signs along the road that say silver alert. That's some old boy that the kids are trying to take the key, they just got their thing. But I guess the point, I have a little problem.